Welcome to the next in our whiteboard series on the Reformation. Today, part 3 on the Radical Reformation. The Kingdom of Munster in 1534 was largely a disaster for Anabaptism. It targeted them, it labeled them as a radical group that was violent, that was dangerous, that was extremist. It took them a long time to recover from this. It did so largely under the leadership of one man, Menno Simons, from 1496 to 1561. He had been a Catholic priest. He was converted to the ideas of Anabaptism, and he led particularly the Dutch Anabaptists to a more peaceful, more inward-looking faith. The name Mennonites comes from his name, and they are the descendants of those German and Dutch Anabaptists of the later 16th century. Menno Simons advocated more of a quiet lifestyle, a highly moral lifestyle, a witness through one's life, but not radical behavior of seizing cities or anything of that kind. So Anabaptists by the later 16th, early 17th century offered a powerful witness. A witness of very faith-filled, very moral lives. Again, as a voluntarist community, as a community that one joined because one wanted to be part of it. The standards of behavior were generally quite high. If you didn't want to do it, you didn't join that, right? So they tended to be very observant in their faith life, very moral in their practice, and were a powerful witness to other Christians at the time. They also were a powerful witness because they were so heavily persecuted. After Munster, right through the 17th century, Anabaptists risked death because of their practices. Other Christians, Protestants, Catholics of various kinds, came after them and had them executed. So their witness through their willingness to lay down their life was very powerful indeed. Now, on the other hand, you also have the anti-Trinitarians who, although a small group, had perhaps a disproportionate impact because their theology was such that it created anxiety among other Christians at the time. One of the most famous cases, or infamous cases, of anti-Trinitarians is the case of Michael Servetus, a Spaniard who had been in long-standing discussions with John Calvin. And Servetus held to anti-Trinitarian views. Calvin obviously did not. They corresponded. They were supposed to meet at one point. They didn't. Servetus published a book called On the Errors of the Trinity. And after that, he had to live under an assumed name because he published the book under his own name. He lived in France as a doctor. And somehow word got out from Geneva to France, to the French authorities, the French Catholic authorities, that they had a notorious heretic living in their midst, this anti-Trinitarian Michael Servetus. But he was living under an assumed name, so he was arrested and investigated. He said, no, I'm not that Servetus guy. I don't know who he is. The authorities were kind of perplexed as to what to do with him. They kept him under guard, but not very close guard, and he actually escaped. He fled France. The French authorities said, aha, of course it was the right guy. They made an effigy of him and set that effigy on fire. Okay? So Servetus knows what will happen if he gets back to France. He fled France. He headed for Italy through Geneva. He stayed in Geneva overnight and was recognized and was put under arrest in Geneva. And now the Genevan authorities had a big problem. What do we do with him? They could have extradited him back to France. He begged on bended knee not to be sent back to France. They could have let him go. He hadn't uttered any anti-Trinitarian ideas in Geneva. But that would be to spread heresy, to spread contagion, to spread this epidemic of wrong belief. And the Genevan authorities did not do that. It was the magistrates who put him on trial. It was a civil trial. He was found guilty. He was condemned. He was burned alive in Geneva in 1553. Now, John Calvin has consistently historically been blamed for this. He was not, however, the judge in the case. He was a witness for the prosecution. He did provide expert theological witness. We should not excuse him. We should not say, oh, well, never mind. You know, it was a big deal and it was wrong. Calvin was a man of his time, and in his time, heresy was a dangerous thing. You could not just let it happen. Anti-Trinitarians did find refuge in Eastern Europe, in Poland and in Hungary. They created communities. They were able to live there in relative safety, protected by nobles who shared their views. And you actually get the creation of the Polish Brethren. This is actually the ancestors of the Unitarian churches today. They had refuge in Poland for almost 100 years, able to live in safety. you.